Hello there, and welcome. I'm glad you again found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep while listening gentle stories. Either way, this journey is for you. You've got nothing to do but rest. Because tonight, we're going to explore entire lore of Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a game that refuses to explain itself. FromSoftware, under the direction of Hidetaka Miyazaki, created a world so dense with hidden meaning, so layered with obscured history, that players have spent years piecing together its secrets. The lore isn't handed to you. It's buried in item descriptions, environmental details, enemy placements, and cryptic dialogue that only makes sense after you've seen everything the game has to offer. This is the complete story of Bloodborne, from the ancient cosmos to the night of the hunt, assembled from fragments scattered across a nightmare. To understand Bloodborne, you must first understand that the universe it presents is fundamentally Lovecraftian. This isn't a world of good versus evil, of heroes defeating villains. This is a world where humanity is insignificant, where cosmic entities exist beyond our comprehension, where knowledge itself is dangerous, and where the greatest horror is understanding just how small and meaningless we truly are. The Great Ones, the godlike beings that drive Bloodborne's story, are not evil in any human sense. They simply exist on a plane so far beyond humanity that their mere presence warps reality and drives mortals to madness. The story begins long before the events of the game, in a place called the Fishing Hamlet. The Fishing Hamlet was a small coastal village, isolated and unremarkable, home to simple fisher folk who lived their lives in quiet obscurity. But the hamlet held a secret that would change the course of history. The villagers worshipped a great one, Kos, a being from the depths of the ocean, a cosmic entity that had somehow made contact with these humble people. The nature of this worship is unclear, but the villagers were transformed by their proximity to Kos. They became something other than human, their bodies twisted by the eldritch influence, their eyes clouded with insight beyond mortal understanding. Kos herself washed ashore at the hamlet, dead or dying, her massive corpse becoming a sight of reverence for the villagers. Within her body was an orphan, a child of a great one, born from death, crying on the shore of a nightmare. The Orphan of Kos would become one of the most significant entities in Bloodborne's mythology, a being of immense power born from tragedy. The fishing hamlet might have remained hidden forever if not for the scholars of Björgenwerth. Björgenwerth was an institution of learning, a college dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. Its master was Willem, a scholar obsessed with understanding the nature of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. Willem believed that humanity could transcend its limitations through insight, through understanding truths that lay beyond normal perception. His motto, carved into the very foundations of Björgenwerth, was "Fear the old blood." Willem understood that the blood of the Great Ones held power, but he also understood that this power came with terrible costs. Willem's students included some of the most important figures in Bloodborne's history. Lawrence, who would become the first vicar of the Healing Church, Mikolash, who would found the School of Mensis, Gehrman, who would become the first hunter. These men studied under Willem, learned his methods, and eventually diverged from his teachings in ways that would shape the world. The scholars of Björgenwerth discovered the fishing hamlet through means unknown. Perhaps they followed rumours of strange happenings on the coast. Perhaps they detected the presence of a Great One through their arcane research. Whatever led them there, what they found changed everything. Here was proof of the Great One's existence, evidence of cosmic entities that could be studied, understood, perhaps even contacted. What followed was an atrocity. The scholars descended upon the fishing hamlet with violence. They slaughtered the villagers, desecrated the corpse of Kos, and harvested what they could from the Great One's remains. The eyes of the villagers, those clouded orbs that held insight beyond human comprehension, were taken as specimens. The blood of Kos was collected for study. The orphan was... Something was done to the orphan, something terrible enough that its curse would echo through time. This massacre is the original sin of Bloodborne's world. Everything that follows, the healing church, the hunts, the nightmares, can be traced back to what the scholars did at the fishing hamlet. The curse laid upon them by the dying villagers, by the violated cause, by the suffering orphan, would ensure that their sins were never forgotten. Among those present at the fishing hamlet was Yharnam, accompanied by his student Maria. Maria was a descendant of the Cainhurst nobility, a skilled warrior who had devoted herself to the hunt. What she witnessed at the hamlet broke something in her. The guilt of participating in the massacre, of watching the scholars defile Kos and torment the villagers, was more than she could bear. She would eventually take her own life, unable to live with what she had done. But death in Bloodborne is rarely the end. Maria's consciousness persisted in the hunter's nightmare, a dimension created by the curse of the fishing hamlet. There she guards the entrance to the nightmare version of the hamlet itself, preventing anyone from reaching the orphan of Kos and potentially ending the curse. Whether she does this out of guilt, out of a desire to protect the orphan, or out of some other motivation is left ambiguous. Maria is one of Bloodborne's most tragic figures, a woman who sought knowledge and found only horror, who tried to do good and participated in evil, who couldn't escape her sins even in death. Yharnam's fate was different, but equally tragic. He would become the first hunter, the founder of a tradition that would define Yharnam for generations. But his role in the fishing hamlet massacre, his loss of Maria, and his eventual imprisonment in the hunter's dream would leave him a broken man, trapped in an endless cycle of violence and regret. The knowledge gained from the fishing hamlet, particularly the old blood harvested from Kos, would become the foundation of the healing church. Lawrence was Willem's most promising student, but he disagreed with his master on a fundamental point. Willem believed that insight, understanding, was the path to transcendence. Lawrence believed that the old blood itself held the key. Fear the old blood, Willem warned, but Lawrence wouldn't listen. He took the blood from Bergenwerth and founded the healing church in the city of Yharnam. The healing church was built on a simple premise. The old blood could heal any ailment, and it worked. Blood ministration, the transfusion of specially prepared old blood, could cure diseases, mend wounds, extend life. Yharnam became a destination for the sick and desperate, people from across the world who came seeking the miraculous healing that only the church could provide. The city grew wealthy and powerful, its cathedrals rising toward the sky, its clergy wielding influence that rivaled any government. But Willem was right to fear the old blood. The blood healed, yes, but it also transformed. Those who received blood ministration began to change. At first, the changes were subtle. Heightened senses, increased strength, a certain hunger. But over time, the transformations became more pronounced. People became beasts. The very blood that saved them twisted their bodies and minds, turning them into monsters that prowled the streets of Yharnam. This was the scourge of the beast, and it would define Yharnam's history. The Healing Church, faced with the consequences of their miracle cure, developed a solution: the hunt. When the beast plague grew too severe, when too many citizens had transformed, the church would declare a night of the hunt. Hunters, warriors trained and equipped to kill beasts, would take to the streets, culling the transformed population, keeping the plague in check. The hunts were brutal, bloody affairs, but they were necessary. Without them, Yharnam would have been overrun. The first hunter was Gehrman, and he established the traditions that all hunters would follow. He created the trick weapons, transforming armaments that could shift between forms to adapt to different combat situations. He developed the hunter's fighting style, aggressive, relentless, using rally mechanics to regain health through continued assault. He trained the first generation of hunters, including Maria, and sent them out to protect Yharnam from the beasts. But Gehrman's role extended beyond mere training. At some point he made contact with a Great One, the Moon Presence, a cosmic entity that would become central to Bloodborne's plot. The Moon Presence created the Hunter's Dream, a pocket dimension that exists outside normal reality. Hunters who are chosen by the dream cannot truly die. When killed, they awaken in the dream, ready to continue their hunt. This makes them effectively immortal, able to face the beasts of Yharnam without fear of permanent death. The price of this immortality is servitude. Hunters bound to the dream must hunt. They must kill beasts, collect blood echoes, and serve the Moon Presence's mysterious agenda. Gehrman, as the first hunter, became the dream's caretaker, trapped in an endless cycle of guiding new hunters and waiting for something. The nature of what Gehrman waits for, what the Moon Presence wants, is one of Bloodborne's central mysteries. The Healing Church, meanwhile, continued to evolve. As the beast plague worsened and the hunts became more frequent, the church developed new methods for combating the scourge. They created the Choir, an elite group of scholars who sought to contact the Great Ones directly. They established the School of Mensis, led by Micolash, which pursued even more radical approaches to cosmic communion. They built the Research Hall, where patients were subjected to horrific experiments in the pursuit of insight. The Choir's methods were perhaps the most successful, in a terrible sense. They discovered that certain sounds, certain frequencies, could attract the attention of Great Ones. They created the Orphanage, where children with potential for insight were raised and trained. They made contact with Ebrietas, a Great One who had been left behind when the others ascended to higher planes of existence. Ebrietas became a source of knowledge and power for the Choir, though the nature of their relationship remains ambiguous. The School of Mensis, led by Micolash, took a different approach. Micolash was obsessed with contacting a Great One called Mergo, the child of Queen Yharnam. His methods were extreme. He and his followers performed a ritual that separated their consciousnesses from their bodies, projecting themselves into a nightmare dimension where they could commune with Mergo directly. The ritual worked, in a sense. Micolash achieved his goal of contacting Mergo, but the cost was catastrophic. The Mensis ritual created the nightmare of Mensis, a twisted dimension that bleeds into reality. It summoned the One Reborn, a grotesque amalgamation of corpses animated by eldritch power. It drove the scholars of Mensis mad, their bodies left as empty husks while their minds wandered through nightmare. and it attracted the attention of entities that should have remained undisturbed. Queen Yharnam herself is a figure shrouded in mystery. She was the queen of an ancient Thumerian civilization, a people who had contact with the Great Ones long before Byrgenwerth or the Healing Church existed. The Thumerians built vast underground labyrinths, the Chalice Dungeons, where they conducted rituals and stored knowledge. Queen Yharnam became pregnant with a Great One's child, Mergo, but something went wrong. The child was stillborn, or perhaps never truly alive in any conventional sense. Yharnam's grief, her connection to her lost child, persists across millennia. The Thumerian civilization is crucial to understanding Bloodborne's deeper lore. They were the first humans to make contact with the Great Ones, the first to use the old blood, the first to suffer the consequences. Their labyrinths contain secrets that the Healing Church desperately sought. Knowledge of the Great Ones, samples of ancient blood, artifacts of immense power. The Chalice Dungeons are essentially archaeological expeditions into this lost civilization, and what hunters find there reveals the true scope of humanity's relationship with the cosmos. The Great Ones themselves deserve careful examination, as they are the driving force behind everything in Bloodborne. The Great Ones are cosmic entities that exist on planes of reality beyond human comprehension. They are not gods in the traditional sense. They don't demand worship, don't judge humanity, don't intervene in mortal affairs out of benevolence or malice. They simply exist, vast and incomprehensible, and their mere presence warps reality around them. What makes the Great Ones unique in Bloodborne's mythology is their one consistent trait. They all yearn for a child. Every Great One loses its child, and every Great One seeks a surrogate. This desire drives much of the game's plot. The Moon Presence seeks a child. Mergo is a child, sought by its mother and by Mikolash. The Orphan of Kos is a child born from death and suffering. Ariana's baby, Rom's transformation, the experiments at the research hall, all of these connect to the Great One's desperate need for offspring. This need humanizes the Great Ones in a strange way. Despite their cosmic nature, despite their incomprehensibility, they share something fundamental with humanity. The desire for children, for continuation, for legacy. This doesn't make them sympathetic exactly. Their methods of acquiring children are horrific, but it makes them understandable in a way that pure Lovecraftian entities typically aren't. The individual Great Ones each have their own characteristics and roles in the story. The Moon Presence is perhaps the most important, as it creates and maintains the hunter's dream. Its motivations are unclear, but it seems to want hunters to kill other Great Ones, specifically Mergo. The Moon Presence may be in competition with other Great Ones, using hunters as pawns in a cosmic game. Or it may have other goals entirely. What's certain is that it has bound Gehrman to its service, and uses the dream to create an endless supply of hunters. Mergo is the child of Queen Yharnam, a Great One that exists in the nightmare of Mensis. Mergo's cry can be heard throughout the nightmare, a haunting sound that drives the plot toward its conclusion. Killing Mergo's wet nurse, the entity that guards the child, silences the cry and triggers the game's ending. Whether Mergo itself is killed, freed, or something else entirely is left ambiguous. Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, is a Great One who was left behind when the others ascended. She resides in the upper reaches of the Healing Church, where the choir studies her and harvests her blood. Ebrietas seems almost sympathetic, a being abandoned by her kind, alone in a world that doesn't understand her. Her boss fight is one of the game's most melancholy encounters. Rom, the vacuous spider, was once a scholar of Byrgenwerth who was transformed into a great one through unknown means. Rom's role is to maintain a veil over reality, hiding the true nature of the world from human perception. When the hunter kills Rom, this veil is lifted and the blood moon rises over Yharnam. Reality itself changes. Enemies become more aggressive. New horrors appear, and the truth of the Great Ones becomes visible to all. Amygdala is a Great One that exists throughout Yharnam, invisible to those without sufficient insight. These spider-like entities cling to buildings, reach through windows and transport hunters to the nightmare frontier. They represent the hidden nature of the Great Ones, always present, always watching, but invisible to those who lack the eyes to see. Kos, or some say Cosm, is the Great One whose death at the fishing hamlet set everything in motion. Her corpse washed ashore, her child was born from her remains, and the curse she or her followers laid upon the scholars of Byrgenwerth echoes through time. Kos may be dead, but her influence persists in the hunter's nightmare. The orphan of Kos is perhaps the most tragic figure in Bloodborne. Born from a dead mother, tormented by the scholars of Byrgenwerth, the orphan exists in eternal suffering in the hunter's nightmare. Killing the orphan and its phantom is the only way to end the nightmare, to lift the curse that has plagued hunters for generations. The orphan's death cry, Yow, is one of gaming's most haunting sounds. Now let's examine the factions and institutions that shape Yharnam's society. The Healing Church is the dominant power in Yharnam, a religious institution built on blood ministration. The church's hierarchy is complex, with different branches pursuing different goals. The vicar is the head of the church, the highest religious authority in Yharnam. Lawrence was the first vicar, and his successors have continued his work of spreading blood ministration while managing the beast plague. Vicar Amelia, whom the hunter encounters in the Grand Cathedral, is the current holder of this position. Her transformation into a beast during the game represents the church's ultimate failure. Even its highest leader cannot escape the curse of the old blood. The choir is the church's scholarly elite, dedicated to contacting and understanding the Great Ones. They wear distinctive blue robes and operate from the upper cathedral ward. The choir's methods include the use of phantasms, small cosmic creatures that can channel arcane power, and the cultivation of children with potential for insight. Their contact with Ibrietus gives them access to knowledge and power that other church factions lack. The school of Menses was originally part of the church but split off to pursue more radical methods. Led by Mikolash, the school sought direct communion with the Great Ones through ritual and dream projection. Their headquarters, Yahargul, became a site of horrific experiments, and eventually the location of the Mensis ritual that created the nightmare of Mensis. The executioners were a militant branch of the church, dedicated to hunting down the vile bloods of Cainhurst. Led by Logarius, the executioners waged a holy war against the vampiric nobility, eventually storming Cainhurst Castle and slaughtering most of its inhabitants. Logarius himself remained at Cainhurst, guarding the entrance to Queen Annalise's chamber, preventing anyone from reaching her and potentially reviving the vile bloodline. The hunters are not technically part of the church, but they serve its interests. The original hunters were trained by Gehrman and operated independently, but over time the church established its own hunting organisations. The Church Hunters, the Powder Kegs, the League. Each group has its own methods and philosophies, but all serve the same basic purpose: killing beasts and maintaining order during the hunt. Cainhurst represents an alternative to the Healing Church's dominance. The Cainhurst nobility were an ancient bloodline with their own connection to the old blood. Predating the Church's rise to power, they developed blood arts, techniques for weaponizing blood itself, and cultivated a culture of aristocratic refinement that stood in stark contrast to the Church's religious fervour. The vile bloods of Cainhurst are vampiric beings who consume blood dregs, the crystallised blood echoes of other hunters. Queen Annalise, the immortal ruler of Cainhurst, seeks blood dregs to bear a child of blood, her own attempt at creating offspring with cosmic significance. The Church viewed the vile bloods as heretics and abominations, leading to the Executioner's crusade against them. The relationship between Cainhurst and the Healing Church is one of Bloodborne's most interesting conflicts. Both factions use the old blood, both seek transcendence through blood, but their methods and philosophies differ dramatically. The Church presents itself as benevolent healers. Cainhurst embraces its predatory nature openly. The Church seeks communion with the Great Ones. Cainhurst seeks to create its own cosmic lineage. The war between them represents a fundamental disagreement about what humanity should become. Byrgenwerth, though largely abandoned by the time of the game, remains important as the origin point for everything that followed. Willem still resides there, transformed into something barely human, sitting in a rocking chair and staring at the moonside lake where Rom dwells. His warnings about the old blood went unheeded, and now he can only watch as the consequences of his students' actions unfold. The Otto Workshop represents yet another faction, hunters who rejected both the Church and traditional hunting methods. The Powder Kegs, as they're known, developed explosive and unconventional weapons, prioritizing raw destructive power over elegance. Their philosophy was simple: if it kills beasts, it's a good weapon. The Powder Kegs were eventually disbanded, but their weapons and techniques persist. The League is a covenant of hunters dedicated to killing vermin, parasitic creatures that infest those who have succumbed to beasthood. Led by Valter, the League represents a more extreme approach to hunting, one that sees the beast plague as a literal infestation to be exterminated. Valter's bucket helmet, worn to prevent him from seeing the vermin that drive him mad, is one of Bloodborne's most distinctive images. Now let's trace the events of the game itself, the night of the hunt that the player experiences. The player character, the hunter, the good hunter, arrives in Yharnam seeking blood ministration. They are sick, dying perhaps, and have heard of the miraculous healing that only Yharnam can provide. They receive a blood transfusion from a mysterious figure and fall into a fever dream, awakening in Iosefka's clinic with no memory of how they got there. This blood transfusion is crucial. It binds the hunter to the hunt, connects them to the hunter's dream, and begins their transformation into something more than human. The hunter is now a participant in the night's events, whether they understand it or not. The hunter's dream serves as the player's hub, a pocket dimension maintained by the Moon Presence. Here, Gehrman waits in his wheelchair, offering cryptic advice and guidance. The doll, a living mannequin created by Gehrman in Maria's image, tends to the hunter, channeling blood echoes into increased power. Messengers, small creatures that serve the dream, provide items and assistance. The dream is a place of safety in a world of horror, but it is also a prison, binding the hunter to an endless cycle of death and resurrection. The hunter's journey through Yharnam follows a specific path, though the reasons for this path only become clear in retrospect. Central Yharnam is where the hunt begins. The streets are filled with transformed citizens, people who have become beasts but retain enough humanity to wield weapons and torches. The cleric beast, a massive creature that was once a member of the church's clergy, guards the Great Bridge. Father Gascoigne, a hunter who has succumbed to the blood's influence, waits in the Tomb of Eden. These early encounters establish the game's themes. The beast plague affects everyone, even those who should be immune. The hunt is brutal and unforgiving, and the line between hunter and beast is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Father Gascoigne's story is particularly tragic. He was a hunter, a good man who fought to protect Yharnam, but the blood eventually claimed him, as it claims everyone. His wife Viola went looking for him and was killed, possibly by Gascoigne himself in his beastly state. Their daughter waits at home, asking the hunter to find her parents. The music box that plays Gascoigne's favourite song can briefly restore his humanity during the fight, a heartbreaking detail that emphasises the man he used to be. Cathedral Ward is the heart of the Healing Church's power. The Grand Cathedral, where Vicar Amelia prays over a skull, possibly Lawrence's, dominates the area. The hunter must obtain the password to enter the Cathedral Ward, then navigate through church servants and hunters to reach Amelia. Her transformation during the fight, from praying woman to howling beast, represents the church's ultimate failure. The very leader of the institution built on blood ministration cannot escape the blood's curse. Old Yharnam is a district that was abandoned and burned during an earlier outbreak of the beast plague. The church attempted to contain the scourge by setting the entire area ablaze, killing everyone within, beast and human alike. Jura, a retired hunter, now guards Old Yharnam, protecting the beasts that live there. He has come to see them as victims rather than monsters, people who deserve protection rather than slaughter. His perspective challenges the hunter's assumptions about the nature of the hunt. The blood-starved beast lurks in Old Yharnam's church, a creature so consumed by hunger that it has become something barely recognisable as once human. Its poisonous attacks and aggressive behaviour make it one of the game's most challenging early bosses. Defeating it grants access to the Healing Church workshop, where the hunter can learn more about the church's history and methods. The Forbidden Woods lie beyond Cathedral Ward, a twisted forest where the church dumps its failures and secrets. The villagers who live here have been transformed by their proximity to Byrgenwerth's experiments, their bodies elongated and serpentine. The shadows of Yharnam, three figures who guard the path to Byrgenwerth, represent the church's attempts to create beings that can commune with the Great Ones. Byrgenwerth itself is a haunting location. The college is largely abandoned, its scholars dead or transformed. Willem sits in his rocking chair, unable or unwilling to speak, pointing toward the moonside lake. Rom, the vacuous spider, waits beneath the lake's surface, maintaining the veil that hides the truth of the world. Killing Rom is the game's turning point. When the spider dies, the veil lifts, and the blood moon rises over Yharnam. Reality itself changes. The amygdala become visible to everyone, not just those with high insight. New enemies appear. The Mensis ritual's effects become more pronounced. The hunter can now see the world as it truly is, a world infested with cosmic horrors, where the Great One's influence is everywhere. Yahar'gul, the unseen village, is the school of Mensis's stronghold. Before the blood moon, hunters can be kidnapped and brought here, imprisoned in cells alongside other unfortunate souls. After the blood moon, the full horror of Yharnam is revealed. The streets are lined with petrified corpses, fused together by the Mensis ritual's power. The One Reborn, a massive amalgamation of bodies animated by eldritch energy, blocks the path forward. The bell-ringing women who summon it must be killed before the creature can be defeated. The nightmare of Mensis is accessible through Yharnam, a dimension created by Mikolash's ritual. Here, the scholars of Mensis wander as empty shells, their minds lost in the dream. Mikolash himself runs through the nightmare's corridors, spouting cryptic philosophy and leading the hunter on a chase through impossible architecture. His boss fight is more puzzle than combat, requiring the hunter to corner him in specific rooms where he can be damaged. Mikolash's dialogue during the fight is some of Bloodborne's most memorable. Ah, Kos, or some say Cosm, do you hear our prayers? Grant us eyes, grant us eyes. Plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy. His obsession with eyes, with insight, with seeing the truth, represents the Byrgenwerth philosophy taken to its extreme. He sought knowledge at any cost, and the cost was his sanity and his humanity. Murgo's loft lies at the heart of the nightmare of Mensis. Here, Murgo's wet nurse guards the crying child. A massive creature with multiple blades and a cloak that seems to contain infinite darkness. Defeating the wet nurse silences Murgo's cry and triggers the game's endgame. The nightmare begins to collapse. The hunter has accomplished what the moon presence wanted, the death of a great one's child. But the game isn't over yet. The hunter must return to the hunter's dream, where Gehrman waits with an offer. The endings of Bloodborne represent different philosophical responses to the game's central questions. In the first ending, the hunter accepts Gehrman's offer. Gehrman will kill the hunter, freeing them from the dream, allowing them to wake up in the real world with no memory of the night's events. This is the good ending in a conventional sense. The hunter survives, escapes the nightmare, returns to normal life. But it's also a form of defeat. The hunter learns nothing, changes nothing, simply walks away from the cosmic horror they've witnessed. In the second ending, the hunter refuses Gehrman's offer. Gehrman, bound by his duty to the moon presence, must fight the hunter to force them out of the dream. This is one of Bloodborne's most emotional boss fights. Two hunters, both trapped by forces beyond their control, fighting because they have no other choice. If the hunter wins, they take Gehrman's place, becoming the new caretaker of the dream, bound to guide future hunters for eternity. The doll tends to them as she tended to Gehrman. The cycle continues. In the third ending, the true ending, the hunter has consumed 3/1/3 of umbilical cords, items that grant insight into the nature of the Great Ones. When the moon presence descends after Gehrman's defeat, the hunter can resist its embrace. The moon presence attacks, and the hunter must defeat it. Upon victory, the hunter transforms into a Great One themselves, a small, slug-like infant cradled by the doll. The hunter has transcended humanity, becoming something new, something cosmic. Whether this is triumph or tragedy depends on your perspective. The DLC, The Old Hunters, adds crucial context to the main game story by exploring the hunter's nightmare. The hunter's nightmare is a dimension created by the curse of the fishing hamlet, a place where hunters who have been blood-drunk, consumed by the thrill of the hunt, are trapped for eternity. Here, they hunt forever, killing and being killed, never escaping the cycle of violence they embraced in life. The nightmare is both punishment and prison, a hell specifically designed for those who took too much pleasure in bloodshed. The hunter enters the nightmare through a specific ritual, finding themselves in a twisted version of Yharnam. The architecture is familiar but wrong, buildings stacked impossibly, streets leading to impossible places. Blood rivers flow through the city. Hunters, the blood-drunk hunters of ages past, attack on sight, trapped in their eternal hunt. Ludwig, the Holy Blade, is the first major boss of the DLC. Ludwig was one of the greatest hunters in Yharnam's history, the founder of the Church Hunters, a man who inspired countless others to take up arms against the beasts, but the blood claimed him as it claims everyone. In the nightmare, Ludwig has become a horrific creature, part horse, part beast, part nightmare. His first phase is pure animal savagery, but when he sees his sword, the Holy Moonlight Sword, he remembers who he was. His second phase is almost noble, a knight fighting with skill and purpose. His death is tragic. He asks if his hunters were good, if they honoured his legacy. The hunter can lie or tell the truth. Either way, Ludwig dies, another victim of the blood. The research hall is one of Bloodborne's most disturbing locations. Here, the church conducted experiments on patients, attempting to grant them eyes, insight, through horrific procedures. The patients wander the halls, their heads swollen with fluid, their bodies twisted by failed experiments. Some beg for death, some attack on sight, some simply weep, unable to comprehend what has been done to them. The living failures are the result of these experiments, beings that achieved a connection to the cosmos, but lost everything else in the process. They float, they cast spells, they call down meteors from the sky. But they are failures, incomplete attempts at transcendence, pitiful creatures that deserve mercy as much as they deserve death. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower guards the entrance to the fishing hamlet. Maria, as discussed earlier, was Gehrman's student, a hunter who participated in the massacre at the hamlet and could not live with her guilt. Her boss fight is one of gaming's greatest, a duel between two hunters, fast and brutal and beautiful. Maria fights with skill and grace, eventually igniting her blood to add fire and reach to her attacks. Her death opens the way to the hamlet, to the truth of what the scholars did. The fishing hamlet in the nightmare is a recreation of the original village, preserved in the moment of its destruction. The villagers, twisted, fish-like creatures, attack the hunter, seeking revenge for what was done to them. Their hatred is understandable. The scholars of Byrgenwerth came here, killed their people, desecrated their god, and faced no consequences. The curse they laid ensures that hunters will suffer for this crime forever. The orphan of Kos waits on the shore beside the corpse of its mother. The orphan is a newborn, technically, but it fights with the fury of something ancient and wronged. Its attacks are savage, unpredictable, devastating. The fight is considered one of the hardest in any FromSoftware game, a brutal test of everything the player has learned. Killing the orphan doesn't end the nightmare immediately. The hunter must approach a black phantom that hovers over Kos's corpse and strike it. Only then does a message appear. Nightmare slain. The curse is lifted. The hunter's nightmare will eventually fade. The blood-drunk hunters trapped within will finally find peace. This is the true resolution of Bloodborne's story, not the defeat of the moon presence, but the ending of the curse that began at the fishing hamlet. The scholar's sin has been addressed. The orphan's suffering has ended. The cycle of violence that trapped hunters for generations has been broken. But to truly understand Bloodborne's lore, we must descend deeper into the Chalice dungeons where the secrets of the Pthumerian civilization await. The Chalice dungeons represent Bloodborne's deepest lore literally and figuratively. These underground labyrinths were created by the Pthumerians, an ancient civilization that predates Yharnam by millennia. The dungeons are not merely tombs or storage facilities, they are ritual spaces, places where the Pthumerians conducted ceremonies to commune with the Great Ones, where they stored their most precious artifacts, where they buried their dead in elaborate crypts designed to preserve them for eternity. The Pthumerians themselves were not quite human. They were taller, thinner, with elongated limbs and pale skin that suggest they spent most of their existence underground. Their civilization was built around blood. They understood its power long before Byrgenwerth, long before the Healing Church. The old blood that Lawrence brought to Yharnam was not a new discovery. It was a rediscovery of knowledge the Pthumerians had possessed for thousands of years. Queen Yharnam ruled the Pthumerian civilization at its height. She was not merely a political leader, but a spiritual one, a figure who had achieved direct communion with the Great Ones. Her pregnancy, carrying Mergo, a child of a Great One, was the culmination of Pthumerian ambition. They had sought to create a bridge between humanity and the cosmos, and Yharnam's child would be that bridge. But something went terribly wrong. Mergo was stillborn, or perhaps never truly alive in any conventional sense. The child existed, but only as a presence, a crying voice in the nightmare. Queen Yharnam's grief was eternal. She appears throughout the game as a spectre, weeping blood, pointing the way toward her lost child. Her appearance before the fight with Rom suggests she wants the hunter to lift the veil, to see the truth, perhaps to finally end Mergo's suffering. The Chalice dungeons contain evidence of what happened to the Pthumerian civilization. The deeper you descend, the more horrific the enemies become. The Pthumerian descendants who guard the upper levels are recognizably humanoid, if twisted. But the creatures in the deepest dungeons, the bloodletting beasts, the abhorrent beasts, the Pthumerian Elder, suggest a civilization that was consumed by the very power it sought to harness. The Pthumerian Elder is particularly significant. This boss wields fire and uses combat techniques that would later be adopted by the hunters of Yharnam. The implication is clear. The Pthumerians were the original hunters, the first humans to take up arms against the beasts that the Old Blood created. Their techniques, their weapons, their entire approach to combat was passed down through the ages, eventually reaching Gehrman and his students. The Loran Chalice dungeons tell a different story. Loran was another civilization that made contact with the Great Ones, one that existed in a desert region far from Yharnam. The Loran dungeons are filled with sand and feature enemies distinct from the Pthumerian crypts. Silver beasts, Loran clerics, the abhorrent beast. Loran fell to the beast plague, just as Yharnam would later fall. The dark beast Parl, encountered in the main game, is a Loran creature, evidence that the plague spread beyond its original boundaries. The Is Chalice dungeons are perhaps the most alien. Is was not a human civilization at all. It was a place where the Great Ones themselves dwelt, or at least visited. The architecture is strange, organic, featuring materials and designs that seem grown rather than built. Ebrietas, the daughter of the cosmos, is found in the Eye's dungeons, suggesting this is where she originated before being discovered by the choir. The treasures found in the Chalice dungeons include some of Bloodborne's most important lore items. The Great Thumaru Hill Chalice, required to access the deepest dungeons, is described as containing weights of madness. The ritual materials needed to create chalices, ritual blood, tomb mould, Bastard of Loran, each tell their own stories about the civilizations that created them. The root chalices deserve special mention. These procedurally generated dungeons represent the unexplored depths of the Thumerian labyrinths, areas that even the Healing Church never fully mapped. The implication is that the dungeons extend infinitely, that there are always more secrets to discover, more horrors to face. This mechanical feature becomes a lore element. The underground world is vast beyond comprehension, and humanity has only scratched its surface. The bosses unique to the Chalice dungeons expand our understanding of Bloodborne's world. The watchdog of the Old Lords is a flaming beast that guards Thumerian tombs, suggesting the Thumerians had their own methods of creating guardians. The Keeper of the Old Lords wields fire and fights with techniques similar to the Hunters, reinforcing the connection between Thumerian and Yharnam combat traditions. The Thumerian Descendant and Thumerian Elder show the evolution of the Thumerian people, from relatively human ancestors to the twisted beings they became. Yharnam, Thumerian Queen, is the final boss of the Chalice dungeons. Fighting her is a strange experience. She's not aggressive in the way other bosses are. She summons her child Murgo to aid her, and her attacks seem almost defensive, as if she is protecting something rather than attacking. Defeating her grants the Yharnam Stone, an item that serves no gameplay purpose but represents the culmination of the Thumerian storyline. The Queen is dead, her civilization is dust, but her grief persists. The NPCs of Bloodborne each carry their own stories, threads that weave through the main narrative and add depth to the world. Eileen the Crow is a hunter of hunters, a woman who has dedicated her life to killing those who have become blood drunk. Her role is essential to Yharnam's ecosystem. Without hunters like Eileen, the blood drunk would multiply endlessly, becoming as much a threat as the beast themselves. Her questline takes the player through several encounters, culminating in a fight against Henrik, a hunter who has lost himself to the blood, and potentially against the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, one of the game's most difficult NPC encounters. Eileen's philosophy is pragmatic and melancholy. She knows that all hunters eventually succumb to the blood, that her own fate is to become what she hunts. Her final words, if she survives her questline, acknowledge this. The night and the dream were long. She has accepted her role and her eventual end. Her blade of mercy, a weapon that splits into 2 daggers, represents her approach, quick, efficient, merciful. Alfred is a hunter who serves the executioners, dedicated to destroying the vile bloods of Canehurst. His cheerful demeanour masks a fanatical devotion to his cause. If the player helps him reach Queen Annalise, he brutally murders her, pulverising her body into paste. His laughter during this act reveals the madness beneath his friendly exterior. Alfred represents the danger of absolute conviction. He believes so completely in his cause that he has become a monster in pursuit of it. The irony of Alfred's quest is that Annalise cannot truly die. Her body can be restored using the Altar of Despair in the Upper Cathedral Ward, where Ebritus mourns. The vile bloods can never be truly destroyed, and Alfred's life's work is ultimately meaningless. Whether he realises this is unclear. After killing Annalise, he can be found dead at Logarius's throne, having taken his own life. Perhaps he understood the futility of his crusade. Perhaps he simply had nothing left to live for. Jura is a retired hunter who guards old Yharnam, protecting the beasts that live there. His perspective challenges the player's assumptions about the hunt. The beasts of old Yharnam were once people, citizens who were burned alive by the healing church in an attempt to contain the plague. Jura has come to see them as victims rather than monsters, deserving of protection rather than slaughter. If the player approaches Jura peacefully, by entering old Yharnam from a specific direction after defeating the blood-starved beast, he will share his philosophy. The beasts do not wish to be hunted. They are not our enemies. His gesture, the brush-off dust, suggests a weariness with the endless cycle of violence. Jura represents an alternative to the hunt, a recognition that the beasts were once human and perhaps deserve compassion. Ariana is a woman of the night who can be sent to Uden Chapel for safety. Her storyline is one of Bloodborne's most disturbing. As the night progresses, Ariana becomes pregnant, impregnated by Uden, an invisible Great One who exists only as voice and presence. Her child, a small celestial creature, is born in the chapel's basement. Ariana dies in childbirth, or perhaps from the horror of what she has produced. Ariana's blood is special. It is Cainhurst blood, suggesting she has noble ancestry. This may be why Uden chose her as a vessel. The Great Ones seek children, and Ariana's bloodline made her suitable for bearing one. Her fate illustrates the horror of the Great One's reproductive drive. They do not ask permission, do not consider consent, simply use humans as vessels for their offspring. The chapel dweller is one of Bloodborne's few genuinely good characters. This deformed man asks only to help others, directing survivors to the safety of Uden Chapel. He has no ulterior motive, no hidden agenda. He simply wants to do good in a world of horror. If the player sends survivors to the chapel, the dweller is grateful, happy to have helped. If the survivors die or are sent elsewhere, he is devastated. The chapel dweller's goodness is remarkable given his circumstances. He is deformed, isolated, living in a world where trust is dangerous and kindness is rare. Yet he maintains his compassion, his desire to help. He represents the possibility of goodness even in Bloodborne's nightmare world, proof that humanity is not entirely lost. Iosefka is a doctor who runs the clinic where the player awakens, or rather, she was. At some point during the night, the real Iosefka is killed and replaced by an imposter, a member of the choir who uses the clinic for her own experiments. The imposter Iosefka transforms survivors sent to the clinic into celestial creatures, pursuing the choir's goal of creating beings that can commune with the Great Ones. The real Iosefka can be found in the clinic's back room, transformed into a celestial creature herself. Her fate is tragic. She was a healer, someone who genuinely wanted to help the sick, and she was murdered and replaced by someone who used her identity for horrific purposes. The impostor Iosefka, if killed after the blood moon rises, drops a 1/3 of umbilical cord, revealing that she was pregnant with a Great One's child. Gilbert is a sick man who came to Yharnam seeking the blood's healing. He provides the player with information and items, grateful for any company in his isolation. As the night progresses, Gilbert's condition worsens. After the blood moon rises, he transforms into a beast and attacks the player. His transformation is inevitable. The blood that was supposed to heal him instead consumed him. Gilbert's story encapsulates Bloodborne's central tragedy. people come to Yharnam seeking healing, seeking hope, and they find only horror. The blood that promises salvation delivers damnation. Gilbert's final form, a beast-possessed soul, is a mockery of the man he was, a creature of pure hunger and violence, with no trace of the kind person who once offered help to a stranger. The suspicious beggar is exactly what his name suggests. A man who claims to be a survivor but is actually a beast in human form. If sent to Eden Chapel, he gradually kills the other survivors, consuming them to sustain himself. His true form, revealed if the player attacks him, is an abhorrent beast, one of the most dangerous enemies in the game. The beggar represents the danger of trust in Bloodborne's world. Not everyone who claims to need help is genuine. Some are predators wearing human masks, waiting for an opportunity to feed. The player must choose whether to trust the beggar, and the wrong choice leads to the deaths of innocent people. Simon the Harrowed appears in the Hunter's Nightmare DLC, a hunter who's been trapped in the nightmare and seeks to understand its nature. He guides the player through the DLC's areas, providing information about the fishing hamlet and the curse that created the nightmare. His final appearance, dying near the entrance to the fishing hamlet, reveals his purpose. He wanted someone to end the nightmare, to lift the curse, even if he couldn't do it himself. Brador is a church assassin who guards the secrets of the fishing hamlet. He wears a beast's head as a helmet and invades the player's world multiple times throughout the DLC. His cell in the nightmare contains evidence of his crimes. He killed a cleric beast, possibly to silence it, possibly as part of his duties as an assassin. Brador represents the church's willingness to use violence to protect its secrets, to kill anyone who might reveal the truth about the fishing hamlet. The items of Bloodborne tell stories that the game never explicitly narrates. Every weapon, every piece of armor, every consumable has a description that adds to the world's lore. The saw cleaver, the game's iconic starting weapon, is described as one of the trick weapons of the workshop commonly used in the hunting business. This simple description establishes that hunting is a business in Yharnam, an industry with its own tools and traditions. The weapon's serrated edge deals bonus damage to beasts, a mechanical feature that reflects the hunter's specialized knowledge of their prey. The hunter's axe tells a different story. Its description mentions that it was designed for hunting hated beasts, with the word hated suggesting the emotional dimension of the hunt. Hunters don't just kill beasts out of necessity, they hate them, fear them, perhaps because they know they could become beasts themselves. Ludwig's Holy Blade is one of the game's most significant weapons lore-wise. Its description reveals that Ludwig was the first of many healing church hunters to come, many of whom were clerics. This establishes the church's role in organising the hunt, transforming it from Gehrman's independent operation into an institutional function. The weapon's transformation from a straight sword to a massive great sword when combined with its sheath represents Ludwig's philosophy of combining skill with overwhelming power. The Blade of Mercy, Eileen's weapon, is described as one of the oldest weapons of the workshop. Its age suggests that hunter hunting has been necessary since the beginning, that blood-drunk hunters have always been a problem. The weapon's quicksilver construction, it's made of siderite, a metal that fell from the sky, connects it to the cosmos, suggesting that even the earliest hunters had some awareness of the Great Ones. The Burial Blade, Gehrman's weapon, can only be obtained after defeating him. Its description reveals that it was wielded by Gehrman, the first hunter, and that its design was created for hunting the beasts of the nightmare. This suggests that Gehrman always knew about the nightmare dimensions, that his role extended beyond simply training hunters to kill beasts in the waking world. The Shikaj is a Cainhurst weapon that uses the wielder's blood to enhance its attacks. Its description mentions that the old nobles, longtime Cainhurst allies, would drench their weapons in their own blood, establishing the Cainhurst tradition of blood weaponry. The weapon's health drain mechanic reflects the cost of this power. Using blood as a weapon literally consumes the wielder. The Rakuyo, Lady Maria's weapon, is found in the fishing hamlet, discarded in a well. Its description reveals that Maria threw the weapon away because she despised it. The Rakuyo is a Cainhurst weapon, and Maria's rejection of it represents her rejection of her heritage, her attempt to distance herself from the blood arts that defined her family. That she threw it away in the fishing hamlet suggests this rejection happened after the massacre, when she could no longer bear the weight of what she had done. The Moonlight Greatsword, Ludwig's true weapon, has appeared in every FromSoftware game since King's Field. In Bloodborne, it is described as a great sword discovered long ago by Ludwig, one that guided him and gave him hope. The sword's cosmic origin, it channels moonlight, connecting it to the Great Ones, suggests that Ludwig's heroism was not entirely his own. He was guided by forces beyond his understanding, used as a tool by entities he never comprehended. The armour sets tell their own stories. The Charred Hunter set found in Old Yharnam belonged to hunters who were burned alive during the church's attempt to contain the plague. The choir set, with its distinctive blue robes and cage-like headpiece, represents the choir's attempt to expand their minds, to see beyond normal perception. The Executioner set, worn by Alfred and his fellow fanatics, is designed to intimidate. Its gold colouring and imposing silhouette mark the wearer as a servant of the church's most violent branch. The Madman's knowledge and Great One's wisdom items provide insight when consumed. Their descriptions reveal that insight is literally knowledge, fragments of understanding that expand the mind. The madman's knowledge is described as the skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the Great Ones, suggesting that madness and wisdom are connected in Bloodborne's world. To understand the cosmos is to lose one's sanity. The blood gems, items that enhance weapons, have descriptions that reveal the Healing Church's experiments. Cursed gems, which provide powerful bonuses but also penalties, are described as born of the brain of a patient. The Church literally harvested the brains of their patients to create these items, using human suffering as raw material for power. The Carol runes, symbols that grant various bonuses, were transcribed by a scholar named Carol, who could hear the whispers of the Great Ones. Each rune represents a concept: hunter, beast, moon, eye, translated into a symbol that humans can comprehend. The runes suggest that the Great Ones have their own language, their own way of understanding reality, and that humans can only grasp fragments of this cosmic knowledge. The themes of Bloodborne extend beyond its narrative into philosophical territory that rewards deep analysis. The relationship between knowledge and madness is central to the game. In Bloodborne's world, understanding the truth drives you insane. The insight mechanic reflects this. As you gain insight, you see more of the world's true nature, but you also become more vulnerable to frenzy, a status effect that represents the mind breaking under the weight of cosmic truth. The scholars of Byrgenwerth sought knowledge and found madness. Mikolash achieved his goal of contacting the Great Ones and lost his sanity in the process. The message is clear. Some truths are too terrible for human minds to bear. This connects to Lovecraft's philosophy of cosmic horror, but Bloodborne adds its own twist. In Lovecraft's work, the horror comes from humanity's insignificance. We are nothing compared to the vast, uncaring cosmos. Bloodborne agrees with this assessment but suggests that humans can transcend their limitations. The third ending, where the hunter becomes a great one, represents the possibility of evolution, of becoming something more than human. Whether this is desirable is left ambiguous, but the possibility exists. The blood itself is a metaphor for addiction. The citizens of Yharnam are dependent on blood ministration, unable to function without regular transfusions. The blood provides temporary relief but causes long-term harm, eventually transforming users into beasts. This mirrors the pattern of addiction, short-term pleasure leading to long-term destruction. The Healing Church, which provides the blood, functions like a drug cartel, maintaining its power by keeping the population dependent on its product. The beast plague can be read as a metaphor for the loss of humanity. The beasts were once people, citizens who lost themselves to their base instincts. The transformation is gradual, first heightened senses, then increased aggression, then physical changes, finally complete loss of identity. This mirrors various forms of dehumanization, from addiction to fanaticism to simple moral decay. The hunters, who kill beasts, are themselves at risk of becoming beasts. The line between hunter and hunted is thin, and everyone in Yharnam walks it. The Healing Church represents institutional corruption. An organization founded to help people, to heal the sick, has become a source of suffering. The church's leaders know that blood ministration causes the beast plague, but they continue to provide it because it maintains their power. They conduct horrific experiments on patients, murder anyone who threatens their secrets, and present themselves as benevolent healers while causing untold harm. This critique of institutional religion is not subtle, but it is effective. The hunt itself is a meditation on violence. Hunters are celebrated in Yharnam, honoured as protectors of the city, but the hunt is brutal, bloody work that changes those who participate in it. Hunters become addicted to violence, to the thrill of the kill, eventually becoming blood drunk and needing to be put down themselves. The game asks whether violence, even necessary violence, can be engaged in without cost. The answer seems to be no. Every hunter eventually falls. The Great One's desire for children humanizes them in unexpected ways. These cosmic entities, vast and incomprehensible, share humanity's most fundamental drive, the desire for offspring, for continuation, for legacy. This doesn't make them sympathetic exactly. Their methods of acquiring children are horrific, but it makes them understandable. The Great Ones are not evil in any human sense. They are simply pursuing their own goals, goals that happen to cause immense suffering for humans. The cyclical nature of Bloodborne's story reflects its themes of futility and repetition. The Thumerians fell to the beast plague. Lauren fell to the beast plague. Now Yharnam is falling to the beast plague. The same mistakes are made again and again, the same horrors repeated across millennia. The hunter's dream ensures that hunters themselves are trapped in cycles, dying and reviving, hunting and being hunted, never truly escaping. Only by breaking the cycle, by killing the moon presence, by ending the nightmare, can anything change. The gameplay mechanics of Bloodborne reinforce its themes in ways that deserve examination. The rally system, which allows players to regain health by attacking after being hit, encourages aggression. Unlike Dark Souls, where careful defense is rewarded, Bloodborne demands that players push forward, take risks, embrace violence. This mechanical choice reflects the hunter's philosophy. Attack, always attack, never give the beast time to recover. But it also reflects the danger of the hunt. Aggression is rewarded, but aggression can become addiction. The line between effective hunting and blood-drunk madness is mechanical as well as narrative. The insight system affects gameplay in multiple ways. High insight makes certain enemies visible, reveals hidden details, and allows access to certain items. But high insight also makes the player more vulnerable to frenzy and increases the difficulty of certain encounters. Knowledge has a cost. Seeing the truth makes you weaker, not stronger. This mechanical implementation of the game's themes is elegant and effective. The blood vial system, where healing items must be farmed rather than refilling at checkpoints, creates a resource management challenge that reflects the world's scarcity. Blood is precious in Yharnam, and the player must constantly seek more. This creates a gameplay loop that mirrors the citizen's addiction, always needing more blood, always hunting for the next fix. The trick weapons, which transform between two forms, represent the hunter's adaptability. A situation that calls for speed requires a different approach than one that calls for power. The weapons transformations are not just mechanical options, but expressions of the hunter's philosophy. Be prepared for anything, adapt to any situation, never be caught off guard. The Chalice Dungeon's procedural generation creates a sense of infinite depth. No matter how far you descend, there is always more. The dungeons cannot be fully explored, fully mapped, fully understood. This mechanical endlessness reflects the lore's suggestion that the Thumerian labyrinths extend forever, that there are always more secrets buried in the earth. The multiplayer systems, summoning help, invading other worlds, are explained through the game's lore. The bells that summon other hunters are described as creating resonance between worlds, suggesting that the multiple dimensions of Bloodborne's cosmos allow for this kind of connection. Invaders are hunters who have been corrupted, seeking blood echoes from other hunters. The mechanical systems are integrated into the world's logic. The sound design and music of Bloodborne deserve recognition for their contribution to the game's atmosphere and lore. The ambient sounds of Yharnam create a sense of dread before any enemy appears. Distant screams, the howling of beasts, the tolling of bells. These sounds establish that the city is in crisis, that horror lurks around every corner. The sound design tells a story of its own, one of suffering and fear. The boss music elevates key encounters into operatic experiences. The cleric beast's theme, with its frantic strings and desperate choir, establishes the tone for the entire game. Ludwig's theme, which shifts from chaotic horror to tragic nobility when he remembers his humanity, tells his story through music alone. The Orphan of Kos's theme, with its discordant wailing, reflects the creature's suffering and rage. The voice acting, though sparse, is memorable. Gehrman's weary resignation, Mikolash's manic enthusiasm, the doll's gentle compassion. Each performance adds depth to its character. The chapel dweller's pathetic gratitude, Eileen's tired wisdom, Alfred's false cheer. These performances tell stories that the game's text only hints at. The silence is equally important. Many areas of Bloodborne are quiet. the absence of music creating tension that any soundtrack would diminish, the approach to a boss room, the exploration of an unknown area, the moment before an ambush, these are enhanced by silence, by the player's own heartbeat filling the void. The visual design of Bloodborne creates a world that feels coherent and lived in despite its fantastic elements. Yharnam's architecture is Victorian Gothic, all spires and gargoyles and narrow streets. But it's Victorian Gothic filtered through nightmare, buildings that seem to lean at wrong angles, streets that loop back on themselves, spaces that feel larger inside than outside. The city was clearly designed by humans, but it has been warped by the influence of the Great Ones, twisted into something that defies normal geometry. The enemy designs progress from recognisably human to utterly alien. The early beasts are clearly transformed humans. You can see the people they used to be in their twisted forms. The later enemies, the kin and the Great Ones, are something else entirely. Creatures that follow no earthly biology, that seem to exist according to different rules. This progression mirrors the player's journey from mundane horror to cosmic revelation. The Great Ones themselves are designed to be incomprehensible. The moon presence, with its cage-like ribs and trailing tendrils, defies easy description. Ebrietas, with her slug-like body and multiple heads, is beautiful and horrifying simultaneously. The amygdalae, with their multiple eyes and grasping hands, are designed to trigger instinctive revulsion. These creatures are not meant to be understood, only feared. The colour palette shifts as the game progresses. Early Yharnam is dark but warm, lit by torches and lanterns. After the blood moon rises, everything takes on a red tinge, the sky itself bleeding. The hunter's nightmare is perpetually twilight, caught in an eternal dusk. The fishing hamlet is grey and cold, washed by an uncaring sea. Each area's colours reflect its emotional tone. The clothing and armour designs tell stories about their wearers. The hunter's set is practical, designed for mobility and protection. The church's vestments are ornate, designed to impress and intimidate. The choir's robes are strange, with cages around the head that suggest both protection and imprisonment. The Cainhurst armour is elegant, aristocratic, designed for a different kind of combat than the brutal hunts of Yharnam. The influence of Bloodborne extends beyond its own narrative into gaming culture and the broader conversation about video game storytelling. Bloodborne demonstrated that environmental storytelling could carry a narrative as effectively as cutscenes or dialogue. The game trusts players to piece together its story from fragments, to read item descriptions, to notice details in the environment. This approach has influenced countless games since, from indie titles to A productions. The game's difficulty, often discussed in terms of challenge and accessibility, serves a narrative purpose. The repeated deaths, the frustration, the eventual triumph, these create an emotional journey that mirrors the hunter's own experience. You're not just playing as a hunter, you are becoming one, learning through failure, growing through struggle. The difficulty is not arbitrary cruelty but intentional design. Bloodborne's treatment of cosmic horror brought Lovecraftian themes to a mainstream audience in a way that few other works have managed. The game doesn't just reference Lovecraft, it understands him, capturing the essence of cosmic horror while adding its own innovations. The Great One's desire for children, the possibility of human transcendence, the critique of institutional religion, these are Bloodborne's contributions to the genre. The game's ambiguity has spawned years of analysis and debate. What exactly happened at the fishing hamlet? What is the moon presence's true goal? Is the third ending a triumph or a tragedy? These questions have no definitive answers, and that's intentional. Bloodborne invites interpretation, rewards close reading, and respects its audience enough to leave some mysteries unsolved. The legacy of Bloodborne continues to resonate years after its release. It stands as one of the defining games of its generation, a work that pushed the boundaries of what video games could achieve as a storytelling medium. Its influence can be seen in countless subsequent titles, from the obvious Souls-like imitators to more subtle inspirations in games that would never be compared to it directly. But perhaps Bloodborne's greatest achievement is the way it makes players feel. The dread of exploring a new area, the triumph of defeating a difficult boss, the horror of understanding what the Healing Church has done, the melancholy of the game's endings. These emotional experiences are what players remember long after the mechanical details fade. The night of the hunt ends, eventually. The blood moon sets, the nightmare fades. But the memories remain, of a city consumed by its own ambitions, of hunters who became what they hunted, of cosmic entities beyond human comprehension, of a world where knowledge is madness and transcendence is possible but terrible. Grant us eyes, grant us eyes, plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy. The dream continues, the hunt never truly ends, and somewhere, in the depths of the Chalice dungeons, in the corners of the hunter's nightmare, in the spaces between waking and sleeping, the Great Ones wait. They have always waited. They will always wait. A hunter is a hunter, even in a dream. The weapons of Bloodborne deserve deeper examination, as each tells a story about its creator, its wielder, and the world that produced it. The threaded cane is described as a weapon favoured by Waits of the Healing Church. Its elegant design, a cane that transforms into a serrated whip, reflects the church's public image. The clergy presented themselves as refined, civilized, above the brutal violence of common hunters. But the whip form reveals the truth beneath the surface. The church was always willing to use violence. They simply preferred to disguise it as something more respectable. The Kirkhammer combines a silver sword with a massive stone block. The description notes that Waits of the Healing Church favoured this weapon for its Waits of the Healing Church. The combination of precision and overwhelming force reflects the church's approach to problems. Try subtlety first, but always have brute force available. The stone block is inscribed with runes, suggesting it has ritual significance beyond its use as a weapon. The stake driver is a powder keg weapon, designed by hunters who rejected the church's refined approach. Its description calls it a trick weapon fashioned by the workshop heretics. The powder kegs. The weapon is essentially a pile bunker, a stake driven by explosive force. It's inelegant, dangerous to the wielder, and devastatingly effective. The powder kegs believed that if a weapon killed beasts, nothing else mattered. The rifle spear was created by a hunter who lost his arm to a beast. Unable to wield a firearm separately, he integrated one into his spear. This practical innovation reflects the hunter's adaptability. They modified their equipment to suit their needs, creating new weapons when existing ones proved insufficient. The rifle spear's existence suggests that many hunters suffered permanent injuries, that the hunt took a physical toll even on those who survived. The Reiterpallasch is a Canehurst weapon, a rapier with an integrated firearm. Its elegant design reflects Cainhurst's aristocratic values. Even their weapons are beautiful, refined, suitable for nobility. But the integrated gun reveals that Cainhurst's elegance was always backed by lethal force. The Vilebloods were not merely aristocrats, they were warriors, trained to kill with grace and efficiency. The Logarius's wheel is one of Bloodborne's strangest weapons, a massive wheel covered in spikes, wielded by the executioners. Its description reveals that the wheel is stained with the blood of countless Vilebloods. The weapon is a symbol of the executioners' crusade, a reminder of the violence they committed in the Church's name. That it can be transformed to spray blood in all directions suggests the executioners embraced the very blood arts they claim to oppose. The Tonitrus is a mace that channels bolt energy, created by Archibald, a church scholar who sought to harness the power of the dark beasts. The weapon's existence proves that the church was willing to study and utilize the power of their enemies. Archibald's experiments were considered heretical by some, but his innovations proved too useful to suppress entirely. The amygdalan arm is exactly what it sounds like, the severed arm of an amygdala wielded as a weapon. Its description notes that waits of the healing church used it, suggesting that some hunters were willing to use the body parts of great ones as tools. The weapon's existence raises disturbing questions about how it was obtained and what it means to wield a piece of a cosmic entity. The Kos parasite is found in the fishing hamlet, a weapon that can only be used effectively by those who have undergone a specific transformation. Its description reveals that it is a weapon of the Great Ones, suggesting that the parasites are not merely creatures but tools, designed for purposes humans cannot comprehend. Wielding the Kos parasite requires the milkweed rune, which transforms the hunter into something resembling a celestial creature. The Holy Moonlight Sword deserves special attention as a recurring element across FromSoftware's games. In Bloodborne, it is described as a great sword discovered long ago by Ludwig, one that waits of the healing church. The sword's cosmic origin, it channels moonlight. Connecting it to the Great Ones suggests that Ludwig's heroism was guided by forces beyond his understanding. The sword chose him, not the other way around. The Whirligig Saw is another powder keg creation, a weapon that is essentially a giant pizza cutter attached to a handle. Its description calls it one of the most horrific weapons ever devised by the workshop. The powder kegs took pride in creating weapons that were effective regardless of elegance. The Whirligig Saw is brutally efficient against beasts, its serrated wheel tearing through flesh with mechanical indifference. The Bloodletter is a Vileblood weapon that transforms by driving its blade into the wielder's chest and pulling out a massive mace of crystallized blood. This self-harm mechanic reflects the Vileblood's philosophy. They were willing to sacrifice their own blood for power. The weapon's transformation is one of the most disturbing in the game, a visual representation of the costs of blood magic. The Simon's bow blade, found in the Hunter's Nightmare, belonged to Simon the Harrowed. Its description reveals that Simon was a hunter of hunters, like Eileen, dedicated to killing those who had become blood drunk. The weapon's transformation from sword to bow reflects the need for versatility in hunting other hunters. Sometimes you need to fight up close, sometimes you need to strike from a distance. The consumable items of Bloodborne reveal details about daily life in Yharnam that the main narrative never addresses. Blood vials are the game's primary healing item, described as special blood used in ministration. The description notes that waits of the healing church distributed these vials to the populace, maintaining their dependence on the church's blood. The vial's ubiquity, they can be found everywhere, purchased cheaply, farmed from enemies, reflects how thoroughly blood ministration had penetrated Yharnam's society. Quicksilver bullets are made from the hunter's own blood, mixed with quicksilver. This detail is easy to miss but significant. Every shot a hunter fires costs them something. The bullets are not merely ammunition but sacrifices, small offerings of blood that power the hunter's firearms. This connects the hunters to the blood economy that defines Yharnam. Antidotes cure poison, but their description reveals something darker. Small medicinal tablets that counteract poison. The existence of antidotes suggests that poison is common in Yharnam, that the city's environment is toxic in ways beyond the beast plague. The church's experiments, the blood that flows through the streets, the creatures that lurk in the shadows, all of these contribute to a poisoned world. Sedatives cure frenzy, described as weights of the healing church. Frenzy is the game's representation of madness, the mind breaking under the weight of cosmic truth. That sedatives exist suggests that frenzy is common enough to require treatment, that many citizens of Yharnam have glimpsed truths that shattered their sanity. Molotov cocktails are described as a makeshift weapon crafted by the mob. This reveals that ordinary citizens fought back against the beasts, that the hunt was not solely the province of trained hunters. The mob, desperate, terrified, armed with whatever they could find, took to the streets alongside the professionals. Their weapons were crude but effective. Fire paper and bolt paper enhance weapons with elemental damage. Their descriptions reveal that these items were created by church scholars studying the weaknesses of beasts. The church's research was not purely theoretical. They developed practical tools for hunters, innovations that made the hunt more effective. This applied research stands in contrast to the more esoteric pursuits of the choir and the school of Mensis. Beast blood pellets temporarily increase the hunter's beasthood, making them more powerful, but also more vulnerable. The description notes that weights of the healing church created these pellets, suggesting that the church was willing to push hunters toward beasthood if it made them more effective. The pellets represent a calculated risk, more power now at the cost of potential transformation later. Blue elixir makes the hunter harder to detect, described as weights of the healing church. The existence of stealth items suggests that not all hunting was direct confrontation. Some hunters preferred to avoid combat when possible, to strike from shadows rather than face beasts head-on. The blue elixir enabled this approach, though its church origins suggest it was developed for more sinister purposes. Lead elixir temporarily hardens the hunter's body, preventing stagger. Its description reveals that it was weights of the healing church, created for hunters who needed to stand their ground against overwhelming force. The elixir's existence suggests that some beasts were so powerful that normal human resilience was insufficient. Hunters needed chemical enhancement just to survive. Shining coins are described as weights of the healing church. Their primary use is marking paths through confusing areas, but their existence reveals something about Yharnam's economy. The city had a monetary system, trade, commerce, all the trappings of civilization. The coin's continued existence, even as the city falls to the beast plague, suggests that some semblance of normal life persisted until the very end. The Carol runes deserve individual examination, as each represents a concept that the Great Ones communicated to humanity. The Hunter rune increases stamina recovery, described as weights of the healing church. The rune represents the essence of what it means to be a hunter: endurance, persistence, the ability to keep fighting when others would fall. Carol heard this concept whispered by the Great Ones and transcribed it into a symbol that humans could use. The Beast rune increases beasthood, described as weights of the healing church. This rune represents the transformation that all hunters risk, the beast within that grows stronger with every kill. That the Great Ones communicated this concept suggests they understand the beast plague, perhaps even created it. The rune allows hunters to embrace their inner beast, gaining power at the cost of humanity. The moon runes increase blood echo acquisition, described as weights of the healing church. The moon is associated with the moon presence, the Great One that created the hunter's dream. These runes suggest that the moon presence wants hunters to grow stronger, to accumulate more power. Whether this is benevolent or self-serving remains unclear. The eye runes increase item discovery, described as weights of the healing church. Eyes are central to Bloodborne's symbolism. Insight is represented by eyes. The Great Ones are covered in eyes. The scholars sought to grant us eyes. The eye runes represent the ability to see what others miss, to find treasures hidden from normal perception. The claw mark runes increase visceral attack damage, described as weights of the healing church. Visceral attacks are Bloodborne's most brutal combat mechanic. The hunter plunges their hand into an enemy's body and tears out their organs. The clawmark runes enhance this savagery, suggesting that the Great Ones appreciate violence, or at least understand its necessity. The lake runes increase physical damage reduction, described as weights of the healing church. The lake is associated with Rom, the vacuous spider who dwells in the Moonside Lake. These runes suggest that Rom's nature, passive, defensive, hidden, can be channeled into protection. The lake runes represent the value of stillness, of waiting, of enduring. The communion runes increase blood vial capacity, described as weights of the healing church. Communion is a religious term referring to the sharing of sacred substances. In Bloodborne's context, communion means blood, the sharing of the old blood that defines Yharnam society. The runes allow hunters to carry more blood, to commune more deeply with the substance that both heals and corrupts. The formless Erden runes increase quicksilver bullet capacity, described as weights of the healing church. Eden is unique among the Great Ones. It has no physical form, existing only as voice and presence. The formless Eden runes channel this incorporeal nature, allowing hunters to carry more of the quicksilver that powers their firearms. Eden's interest in hunters remains mysterious. The Eden Wreath runes restore quicksilver bullets on visceral attacks, described as weights of the healing church. These runes suggest that Eden is pleased by violence, that the Great One gains something from the brutal deaths hunters inflict. The connection between visceral attacks and bullet restoration implies a transaction: blood for power, violence for resources. The Blood Rapture rune restores health on visceral attacks, described as weights of the healing church. This rune represents the intoxicating nature of violence, the way that killing can feel good, can heal wounds both physical and psychological. The Blood Rapture rune makes this metaphor literal. Violence heals, killing restores. The air runes increase blood echo acquisition from visceral attacks, described as weights of the healing church. These runes suggest inheritance, legacy, the passing of power from one generation to the next. The visceral attack, the most intimate form of killing, transfers more than just blood echoes. It transfers something essential, something that makes the hunter an heir to their victim's power. The milkweed rune transforms the hunter into a lumen wood, described as weights of the healing church. This rune represents the ultimate transformation, the abandonment of human form for something alien. The lumen wood are connected to the Great Ones, perhaps a stage in the evolution toward cosmic existence. The milkweed rune allows hunters to begin this transformation, to become something other than human. The beast's embrace rune transforms the hunter into a beast, described as weights of the healing church. This rune represents the opposite path from milkweed. Instead of ascending toward the cosmos, the hunter descends into beasthood. The beast's embrace allows hunters to fully become what they hunt, to embrace the transformation that the blood demands. The covenants of Bloodborne represent different philosophical approaches to the hunt and the world. The Hunter of Hunters covenant, led by Eileen the Crow, is dedicated to killing blood-drunk hunters. Members of this covenant believe that hunters who have lost themselves to the blood are as dangerous as beasts, perhaps more so. The covenant's existence acknowledges a dark truth. The hunt creates monsters as well as killing them. Someone must hunt the hunters. The Executioner's Covenant, led by Alfred, is dedicated to destroying the Vile Bloods of Canehurst. Members believe that the Vile Bloods are heretics, abominations that must be exterminated. The Covenant's fanaticism is disturbing. Alfred's murder of Queen Annalise reveals the violence that lies beneath the Executioner's righteous facade. The Covenant represents religious extremism, the danger of absolute conviction. The Vile Bloods Covenant, led by Queen Annalise, is dedicated to collecting blood dregs for the Queen. Members believe that blood dregs, the crystallized blood echoes of other hunters, can help Annalise bear a child of blood. The Covenant represents an alternative to the Healing Church's approach, a different path to cosmic significance. The Vile Bloods are not evil, merely different, pursuing their own goals through their own methods. The League Covenant, led by Valter, is dedicated to killing vermin. Members believe that vermin, parasitic creatures visible only to those with the proper insight, are the true cause of the beast plague. The Covenant's obsession with vermin borders on madness, but Valter's conviction is absolute. The League represents the danger of seeing patterns that may not exist, of finding enemies everywhere. The Choir Covenant is not joinable in the traditional sense, but the Choir's philosophy permeates the game. The Choir sought to contact the Great Ones through sound, through the manipulation of frequencies that could attract cosmic attention. Their methods were successful. They made contact with Ebritas, but the cost was high. The Choir represents the pursuit of knowledge at any cost, the willingness to sacrifice everything for understanding. The architecture of Yharnam tells its own story, one of ambition, corruption, and decay. The Grand Cathedral dominates the city's skyline, a massive Gothic structure that represents the Healing Church's power. Its spires reach toward the sky, as if trying to touch the cosmos. The cathedral's interior is equally impressive. Vast spaces, ornate decorations, religious imagery that blends Christian symbolism with something older and stranger. The Grand Cathedral is where Vicar Amelia prays, where the church's highest rituals are performed, where the truth of the old blood is hidden behind layers of ceremony and tradition. The Healing Church workshop is where the hunter's weapons were created, a practical space hidden behind the cathedral's grandeur. The workshop's existence reveals that the church was always prepared for violence, that the hunt was built into their institution from the beginning. The workshop's abandonment, it is empty when the player visits, suggests that the church has moved on to other methods, other tools. The upper cathedral ward is where the choir conducts its research, a space designed for communion with the cosmos. The architecture here is different from the rest of Yharnam, more open, more oriented toward the sky, as if the buildings themselves are reaching for the great ones. The orphanage, where the choir raise children with potential for insight, is located here. The upper cathedral ward represents the church's highest aspirations and its darkest secrets. Yharnam, the unseen village, is the school of Mensis' stronghold, a district that most Yharnam citizens never knew existed. The architecture here is oppressive, claustrophobic, designed to disorient and confuse. The buildings seem to lean inward, the streets twist back on themselves. The very geometry feels wrong. Yharnam represents the school of Mensis' rejection of normal reality, their embrace of nightmare logic. Canehurst Castle stands apart from Yharnam, a fortress of the old nobility that predates the Healing Church's rise. The castle's architecture is different from Yharnam's, more medieval, more European, suggesting a different cultural tradition. The castle's frozen state, it is perpetually covered in snow, represents the vile blood's stasis, their inability to move forward after the executioner's crusade. Byrgenwerth is a college, an institution of learning that spawned everything that followed. The building is modest compared to the church's grand structures, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge began in humble circumstances. Byrgenwerth's abandonment, Willem sits alone, the halls are empty, represents the failure of pure scholarship. Knowledge alone was not enough, it had to be applied, and the applications proved catastrophic. The fishing hamlet, in the Hunter's Nightmare, preserves the architecture of a simple coastal village. The buildings are humble, practical, designed for people who lived by the sea. The hamlet's destruction, the burned buildings, the scattered corpses, represents the violence that the scholars of Byrgenwerth brought to this peaceful place. The architecture tells a story of innocence destroyed. The symbolism of eyes pervades Bloodborne, representing insight, knowledge, and the cost of understanding. Eyes appear everywhere in the game, on enemies, on items, in the environment. The brain of Mensis is covered in eyes. The winter lanterns have heads made of messengers, each with multiple eyes. The celestial creatures have bulbous heads that suggest expanded craniums, room for more eyes, more insight. The obsession with eyes reflects the scholar's belief that seeing more would lead to understanding more. The phrase "grant us eyes" appears repeatedly, most memorably in Mikolash's ravings. The scholars sought eyes, literal eyes, metaphorical eyes, any means of expanding their perception. They believed that human vision was limited, that the Great Ones saw truths invisible to normal sight. If humans could gain more eyes, they could see these truths too. The irony is that gaining eyes, gaining insight, leads to madness. The more you see, the less you can bear. The winter lanterns with their many eyes inflict frenzy on sight. The brain of Mensis, covered in eyes, drives viewers insane. The eyes that the scholars sought became instruments of destruction, weapons that shattered minds rather than enlightening them. The doll's eyes are notable for their emptiness. She sees, but what she sees is unclear. Her vision is not human vision, not Great One vision, but something else entirely. The doll represents a different kind of sight, one that is compassionate rather than maddening. Her eyes offer comfort rather than horror. Master Willem's eyes are covered, hidden behind a blindfold or perhaps simply closed. He who sought insight above all else has chosen not to see. This could represent wisdom, understanding that some truths are too terrible to witness, or it could represent failure, the inability to face what his research has wrought. Willem's covered eyes are a mystery that the game never resolves. The blood of Bloodborne is more than a gameplay mechanic. It is the substance around which the entire world revolves. Blood heals, blood transforms, blood connects humans to the Great Ones. Blood is currency, religion, addiction, and doom. The old blood that Lawrence brought from Bergenwerth became the foundation of a civilization, and that civilization is now collapsing under the weight of its own dependence. The different types of blood in the game each have significance. Cold blood, found on corpses, represents the residual life force of the dead. Blood vials contain processed blood, refined for healing. Blood gems are crystallized blood, concentrated power that can enhance weapons. Blood dregs are the blood echoes of hunters, sought by the vile bloods for their queen. Each form of blood serves a different purpose, but all derive from the same source. The blood moon that rises after Rom's death represents the apotheosis of blood's influence. The sky itself bleeds, reality warps, and the Great One's presence becomes undeniable. The blood moon is not merely a visual effect, but a transformation of the world, a moment when blood's power reaches its peak. The beast plague is blood's curse, the price of its healing. Those who receive blood ministration eventually transform, their bodies twisted by the very substance that saved them. The plague is not a disease in the conventional sense, but a consequence, an inevitable result of using power that humans were never meant to wield. The Vile Blood's blood arts represent an alternative approach to blood's power. Rather than receiving blood passively, the Vile Bloods weaponize it actively, using their own blood as a tool for combat. This approach has its own costs. The Bloodletter's transformation requires driving a blade into the wielder's chest, but it represents agency, control, a refusal to be merely a vessel for blood's power. Bloodborne's world is one where humanity reached for the stars and found only horror. The scholars of Bergenwerth sought knowledge and found madness. The Healing Church sought to help the sick and created a plague. The hunters sought to protect Yharnam and became monsters themselves. Every ambition led to catastrophe, every hope to despair. And yet, the game offers possibilities for transcendence. The third ending, where the hunter becomes a great one, suggests that humanity can evolve, can become something more than it was. The ending of the hunter's nightmare suggests that curses can be lifted, that sins can be addressed, that cycles can be broken. Bloodborne is not purely nihilistic. It acknowledges the horror of existence while suggesting that existence can be transformed. The hunter's journey through Yharnam is a journey through humanity's failures and possibilities. Every boss represents a different kind of failure. Vicar Amelia's faith, Ludwig's heroism, Mikolash's scholarship, the orphan's innocence. But defeating these bosses represents the possibility of moving beyond failure, of learning from the mistakes of others, of finding a path that they could not. The night of the hunt ends. The blood moon sets. The nightmare fades, but the questions remain. What does it mean to be human in a universe of cosmic horror? What is the cost of knowledge? Can transcendence be achieved without losing everything that makes us who we are? Bloodborne does not answer these questions. It presents them, explores them, and leaves them for players to consider. The game's ambiguity is not a flaw but a feature, an invitation to think deeply about themes that have no easy resolutions. Fear the old blood. Grant us eyes. A hunter is a hunter even in a dream. The night and the dream were long. The connections between Bloodborne and other FromSoftware titles reveal Miyazaki's recurring themes and obsessions. The Moonlight Greatsword appears in every Souls game and Bloodborne, a cosmic weapon that transcends individual narratives. In Bloodborne, it belongs to Ludwig, a hero corrupted by the very forces he sought to combat. The sword's presence suggests a shared universe, or at least shared concepts, across FromSoftware's works. The moonlight represents something beyond human understanding, a power that chooses its wielders rather than being chosen. The concept of cycles, of history repeating, of the same mistakes being made across generations, appears throughout Miyazaki's games. Dark Souls features the cycle of fire and dark, an endless repetition that can only be broken through specific actions. Bloodborne features the cycle of the hunt, the endless repetition of violence that traps hunters in the dream. Both games suggest that breaking cycles requires sacrifice, understanding, and the willingness to embrace an uncertain future. The theme of institutional corruption runs through all of Miyazaki's work. The Way of White in Dark Souls, the Healing Church in Bloodborne, the various factions in Elden Ring, all are institutions that began with noble purposes and became sources of suffering. Miyazaki seems fascinated by the way that organizations designed to help people can become instruments of oppression, how good intentions can lead to terrible outcomes. The environmental storytelling that defines Bloodborne was pioneered in Demon's Souls and refined in Dark Souls. Miyazaki's games trust players to piece together narratives from fragments, to read item descriptions, to notice details that others might miss. This approach creates a sense of discovery that traditional storytelling cannot match. Players feel like archaeologists uncovering ancient secrets rather than passive recipients of predetermined narratives. The difficulty of FromSoftware's games serves a narrative purpose beyond mere challenge. The repeated deaths, the frustration, the eventual triumph, these create emotional investment that easier games cannot achieve. When you finally defeat a boss after dozens of attempts, you feel what the character would feel. The difficulty is not arbitrary cruelty, but intentional design, a way of making players experience the struggle that defines these worlds. The community that has formed around Bloodborne deserves recognition for their contributions to understanding the game's lore. Players have spent years analysing every item description, every environmental detail, every line of dialogue. They have created comprehensive wikis, produced hours of video essays, written thousands of forum posts debating the game's mysteries. This collective effort has uncovered secrets that no individual player could have found alone. The debates continue. What exactly is the Moon Presence's goal? Is the third ending a triumph or a tragedy? What happened to the Thumerians? These questions have no definitive answers, and the community's ongoing discussions keep the game alive years after its release. Bloodborne's lore rewards this kind of engagement. The game was designed to be analysed, to be discussed, to be debated. Miyazaki has said that he wants players to share their interpretations, to build understanding together. The community's efforts are not just appreciation but participation. a continuation of the game's design philosophy. The speedrunning community has found their own ways to engage with Bloodborne, discovering glitches and exploits that reveal the game's underlying systems. These discoverers, while not strictly lore-related, demonstrate the depth of engagement that Bloodborne inspires. Players want to understand this game completely, to master every aspect of its design. The fan art, the cosplay, the music covers, the written fiction, all of these represent the community's love for Bloodborne's world. The game has inspired creativity that extends far beyond playing it. Bloodborne has become a cultural touchstone, a shared reference point for discussions of horror, difficulty, and narrative design in video games. Bloodborne stands as a masterwork of video game design, a title that demonstrates what the medium can achieve when every element, gameplay, narrative, visual design, sound, difficulty, works together toward a unified vision. The game does not compromise, does not explain itself, does not hold the player's hand. It presents a world of horror and beauty, of despair and transcendence, and trusts players to find their own way through. The lore of Bloodborne is not a story that can be fully told. It is a mystery that can be explored, a puzzle that can be partially assembled, a dream that can be experienced but never fully understood. This is intentional. Miyazaki created a world that exceeds human comprehension, and the game's lore reflects this: vast, complex, ultimately unknowable. But the attempt to understand is worthwhile. Every item description read, every environmental detail noticed, every connection made between disparate elements. These efforts bring us closer to Bloodborne's truth, even if that truth can never be fully grasped. The journey matters more than the destination. Tonight, Yharnam joins the hunt. The doll tends to the dream. The moon presence watches from above, and somewhere a hunter awakens, ready to face the beasts of Yharnam, ready to uncover secrets that have been buried for millennia, ready to make choices that will determine the fate of worlds. May you find your worth in the waking world.